What's going on, bass players? Shout out to all the pickers, but this video, I really want to just address the struggling pluckers out there. Have any of you been struggling and practicing your ass off to play fast 16th notes with, three fingers, and you're just hitting a wall on your progress like a crash test dummy every single time you reach a certain speed, where your progress is just going nowhere faster than you are, and like you hit a certain tempo, you lose the ability to pluck the strings with three fingers and just keep the notes just evenly spaced apart. Okay, first off, I'm here for you. I was one of you, and you have all my sympathies. It is a bitch. Secondly, there is some hope. Uh, I learned some stuff in the last year or so that I want to pass on to you. And let me be honest, I had a tremendous amount of difficulty getting across the finish line on this. I quit playing metal back in the mid 2000s because I realized I sucked the big one. And so I pretty much just stuck with playing just pop music or just mid tempo rock, whatever, like at least until a couple years ago. But back then, I never really felt like pushing myself. I get bored easy, and I was too lazy and just didn't have the drive it takes, with putting in those hours of just relentless, monotonous practice of the same riff over and over again. If it didn't happen fast, I just moved on to the next song and tried something different. But something changed in me since around the start of last year, 2024. I gotta say, I decided I'd stop being a little bitch and learn how to play metal with three fingers. And I went off on a mission, man. My inner mental patient just kind of took over and decided, bro, you may not want to do this, but I'm doing it for you, punk ass. We're going to go at this together and finally get good at playing this damn thing with three fingers, even if you wind up in the psych ward at Bellevue. And I'll tell you, I drove myself fucking nuts. It became such an obsession. I obsessed on it at home, at work, on the drive to work, the drive home from work, home watching TV. I was constantly in my head trying to come up with ways, any kind of hacks I could think of to try and pull this thing off. And so I began practicing every single night. This became my life. Every damn night on the couch with low budget horror movies on Tubi in the background. And believe me, if you're a 70s and 80s horror junkie, there are a shit ton of them on there. And all the while, I'm just hammering away on the strings for hours and hours. I had my cat next to me on the couch, just kind of giving me the side eye, like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? I had a metronome up on the back of the couch, just, kind of clicking my life away up, right over my shoulder. My wife would hear me out there in the living room, just F-bombing my living room like Normandy Beach. She started referring to my bass as my mistress. And after a while, I swear, I was probably just doing this in my sleep. I don't know how the hell I got skin on my fingertips still. I became a crazy person. And in my other spare time, that was spent just, like going full on Indiana Jones, just like on an archaeological expedition, just in the Reddit forums and your YouTube videos and bass player articles, just searching constantly, trying to dig up anything useful at all. Any helpful tips or tricks that could help me out. And after a while, I got to say, it became about as fun as a root canal. Frodo and Sam had an easier, less stressful journey than I did getting to their destination, but eventually I got there with a technique that worked for me, and I want to share it with you. And on this video, we've got actually 5 techniques for playing bass notes super fast. There's three finger variations here, and two of the other 2 techniques only require 2 fingers. So if you're saying, dude, what the fuck? Well, for some dumb reason, the three finger thing had a nicer ring to it in the title, but whatever, I lied.
You're a liar. You're a liar.
You clicked on this expecting 3, you're getting 5. So yay, everybody wins. I guess. We'll see. I don't know. Who cares? Let's go. Okay, so let's say you're a metal bass player and you've gotten good at keeping up on like the mid-tempo plucking, right? Yeah, you can keep up on stuff like Enter Sandman, Pantera's Walk, maybe some Clutch, Life of Agony, Black Sabbath. Let's say you have Spotify and Shuffle and you're just jamming along, you're doing well, and then Slayer's Angel of Death comes on. Now you got three choices. There's that magical three again. Well, you could be a bum like I was and skip the track completely and move on with your life. You could play with two fingers at mid-tempo, or you could just resign yourself to being a pick player. I don't think there's any shame in being a pick player. I'm not shaming out there. I still do it when a song calls for it. And there's no shame in going half tempo either. Many bassists in metal do it, but it just never felt right to me. By playing mid-tempo, what I mean is like when the guitar is doing this, the bass is doing this. Honestly, when I started playing bass, I was a pick player for years because I knew that my skills were completely mid and I'd never be like my bass heroes. But in the last couple years, I decided I'm more of a plucker, not a picker. It's just more fun to me that way, Plus, I always admired the skill it takes to do that, to be able to play fast and right in the pocket with two fingers, let alone three. Now, a lot of metal bassists and rock bassists, they use a pick for many reasons. I know one is because, well, in metal, there's a school of thought that it helps the tone of the bass cut through better in the mix. And another reason is, honestly, is because the guitars are hard as hell to keep up with. In many songs, playing the more complex riff along with what the guitarist is doing can be really challenging with just your fingers. I know Dave Ellefson from Megadeth has said exactly that, and I can't say I blame him. He said, yeah, he uses a pick because Dave Mustaine, he just can't keep up with Mustaine, using his fingers. And Mustaine's a tough SOB pick or no pick to keep up with, but a lot of bassists just play along with the super fast guitar parts at mid-tempo, and since it's kind of buried in the mix, it's really hard to notice anyway. In the 80s and 90s, with the exception of bands like Overkill and Motorhead, it was really a thing for the engineer for some reason, or whoever, to kind of bury the bass tracks in metal music quite a bit far down. They're almost, you can't even hear them. But what's cool is, thanks to Guitar Hero and the advancement of audio editing software, a lot of the isolated bass tracks for many of our favorite bands have made their way onto YouTube over the years. And you can hear how good, or in some instances, how bloody awful what they were doing was. Like, so many of these dudes that we had on pedestals, just thinking they were these bass gods, now you can hear all their little mistakes and missed notes that the engineer just kind of tucked underneath, the drums, guitars, and vocals. In some instances, you can hear that shit that they were doing that made absolutely no sense. Like weird fills they'd throw in, kind of like, dude, where the fuck are you going? Well, I want to get into this talking about a few bass players that have definitely left their mark in the rock and metal world as far as speed goes. So let's start there, and hopefully with a little practice, one of these techniques will work for you and give you the fastest fingers this side of the Addams family. So let's get at it. The best way for me to tackle this is I'll just go in the order in which I tried them. All right, technique number one. The first technique that I attempted, legitimate technique anyway, was the way Billy Sheehan from Mr. Big and Alex Webster from Cannibal Corpse do it. I'm not sure which guy did it first. I think Sheehan might have done it first, but back in 2011, Alex did a book called Extreme Metal Bass, and it demonstrates the whole three-finger technique of using your ring finger, 3, middle, 2, index, 1. Now, before I tackled this approach, I found through all my digging on Reddit that a lot of people just like me, when they tried the method of just doing 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, they all ran into the same issue, where as fast as you get, it just ends up sounding like gallops. The thing is, you're trying to play bars of 4 with 3 fingers, and for some reason, it's just next impossible for your stupid, puny little brain to wrap itself around the concept. Plus, the further complicate things. While your index and middle operate independently, the two middles, they're partially connected. So once you hit a certain speed, there's a cutoff, and it just sounds like a Hollywood Western. I mean, gallops are great for doing, like triplets. Like Steve Harris from Iron Maiden uses them a lot. Yeah, I know he uses two fingers for it, whatever. But or for instance, Primus' song "Toys Go Winding Down." He uses three fingers like this. But when you're trying to play long, continuous runs of this, it just sounds like this. And what Alex and Billy figured out was that instead of counting 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You accent every fourth note. You play 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And the fourth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 4 lands on a different finger each time. So the theory is by doing that, by counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you kind of trick your brain into thinking in quarters and not thirds. And they suggest you practice with a metronome. It builds the muscle memory, and eventually it just becomes second nature. I tried like hell. I did this technique for several months, and every single night. And in the end, I wasn't any closer than when I started. No matter how much I tried, it didn't work for me. So it was back to Reddit, YouTube, and the drawing board. Next, we got the dude who inspired me to play a fretless bass, Steve DiGiorgio. The best bassist in metal, I'm going to say it. So have fun taking me apart in the comments section down there. I'm sure some of you are already typing as I speak angrily, but I'm moving on anyway. I want to say a few things about this dude. DiGiorgio, he's been my bass hero since 1993 when the band Death's album, Individual Thought Patterns, came out. He's the one who inspired me to play with three fingers decades ago, but it just wasn't meant to be. And on a side note, I'll give him this. He's the only dude in metal who can wear Birkenstocks on stage and still have 100% of my respect. Okay, maybe 98%. The thing is, I figured for years that he played the three finger method in the conventional way of just doing 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. He was a superhuman fucker that could do it, but he doesn't. And that brings me to technique number 2. Last year, while I was searching around, I came across an article written by him, in fact, and he tells you his exact method. While he does use three fingers, he does it a little differently. What he does is 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2. And I saw that. I remember thinking, like, okay, that's different. I figured, all right, maybe that'll work for me. And how kick-ass would it be if my hero's technique, was the one that worked out for me? Yeah, that's not going to work either, bro. Look, what works for some is not going to work for everyone. That's just the way it goes. And he's just on another level. He's got way more experience under his belt, and he's just much more of a natural talent than I am. Fine. I'm okay with it. He's a 6'5" Viking with these giant catcher's mitts for hands, my small ass hands. We're just not built the same with the same talent level. Okay, but that didn't stop me from trying for months and months again to make it work. And there I sat, me and Tubi and my cat, for hours on end, for maybe 2 to 3 months. I just practiced with the metronome. And I practiced this 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, in quick succession, just speed bursts, slower, just kind of long, drawn out runs, like a marathon runner versus a sprinter, just 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. I really had my heart set on getting this technique to work for me, especially since the other one failed. But in the end, I still got nowhere. And now I had this new problem where I was doing quadruplets instead of triplets. Every time I cranked the metronome just a bit too fast, I hit the wall and it was nothing but quads and unevenly timed plucks. So again, it was just time to just lick my wounds, try something different, if I could even find anything different. So half a year or more has gone by, just practicing techniques one and two relentlessly, just swapping them back and forth. I would even spend the time going to and from work practicing both methods on the nub of my car seat until eventually I wore the damn vinyl off it. But I still wasn't getting anywhere. And I almost reached the point where I was just, look, you just got to resign yourself. All right, dude, I'm just not talented enough. Pure and simple. It happens. It's the dumb luck of the draw. You stink. Not everyone is going to be cut out to be Jimi Hendrix or Buddy Rich or Steve DiGiorgio. In fact, that's just the way it goes. It's the roll of the dice and the small ass hand I've been dealt. But I had a glimmer of hope. And along the way, quite by accident, I discovered a whole other technique while trying to perfect methods one and two. And this brings me to technique number three. Now, this method, this is one of the two finger methods. Just screwing around, I found that locking my middle and index finger together, I could quickly kind of just flick the strings back and forth. Now, my thinking was, there's no book on this, on how to do it. Who says you can pluck, but you can't flick?
Flick? Flick who?
So I began practicing the technique that I call flicking the bean. A few things about this method. I kind of considered it cheating a bit, and I really don't know why. Because you can actually keep up with the guitars using this method easily. I mean, it does get a bit tiring. Your fingers start to cramp up on long runs, but it does work. But the thing is, I was dead set. I wanted to use the three finger method somehow. So I kind of kicked this technique to the curb. And I mean, it's good to have as a backup or a secondary technique, just kind of an extra tool in the arsenal, as they say, but I didn't want it to be my primary method. Now, it was nice to be able to kind of pat myself on the back for discovering this because I hadn't seen anyone demonstrate this method anywhere on Reddit or YouTube or whatever the hell, or wherever the hell I scoured on the internet for all that time. However, that said, I also didn't have the hubris to think that, there is no way in the centuries old history of stringed instruments that I had done something that no one else had thought of before me. Well, shortly after discovering this technique, I found out I was right. And I came across a video of this guy. Brian Beller from Death Clock. Beller, you fucker, you beat me by at least 12 years or so. How dare you? I mean, I've never been a Metalocalypse or a Death Clock fan, but he is a badass player. I've seen what he does, and he's amazing. That said, I think I read somewhere that the bassist from Obscura uses the same technique, so he beat me too. He might have even beaten Brian Beller for all I know, but whichever one of them invented the whole flicking the bean technique, I'm sure the groupies are just lining up at the tour bus for these lucky devils. But for me, okay, it was a short-lived, mild success, but I wasn't really fully satisfied. Now we move on to technique number 4. Now this is what worked for me for my relentless ass. I mean, almost. But it got me to technique number 5. We'll get back to that in a minute. As I kept practicing methods 1 and 2 during the million or so drills of just 3 2 1 3 2 1 3 2 1, I noticed something with the index finger. Every time you do 3 2 1 3 2 1 3 2 1, you have to bring your fingers back across the strings to reload, I guess you can say. And I noticed this. And I discovered that it was economical to flick the string on the way back and use that as my 4 count. So I started doing 3 2 1 flick, 3 2 1 flick, 3 2 1 flick. And pretty quickly I was banging out notes real fast. I kept working with the metronome to keep the index, middle, and ring finger, the timing evenly spaced apart. And next thing I knew, I had it down pretty tight. But I was maybe 90% of where I wanted to be, but I wasn't quite happy with it because I'm a perfectionist lunatic. And I thought, there was still a little room for improvement. Plus, it was so aggravating that every time I'd sit down with the bass, I'd have to warm up for 15, 20 minutes with the metronome every single time. And even then, to keep all the plucks evenly timed, it was still a chore. Now, this brings us back to technique number 5. I saved the best for last, at least my favorite. This was my greatest success.
Great success.
And we're going back to 2 fingers again. We already covered the whole flicking method in technique 4. This one is simply a variation of that method. I decided to practice, but leave the ring finger number 3 out of it. So just 2-1 flick, 2-1 flick, 2-1 flick. And very quickly, I got there. For me, it's more evenly timed than the 3-finger variation and pretty much just as fast. So now if you want to play something like Toys Go Winding Down, you got your choice where you could either do the gallops or you can do the 2-finger method. Either way, now when Angel of Death comes on, I don't have to just run away like a little bitch, and now I can keep up with the guitars. And I'm just completely elated about it. Ecstatic, to say the least. I made it. Good frigging God. So in the end, only my own methods actually wound up working for me anyway. And the ironic part is, as insane as I was about being this 3-fingered monster of a bass player, I wound up right back where I started, back to 2 friggin' fingers, and I hate everybody. What did I learn? I learned that a borderline healthy dose of insanity, when properly channeled, it can be a strong attribute in achieving your goals. So it's hardly a loss at all. I achieved my goal. I kept myself out of the straitjacket and rubber room, and I can still use techniques 3 and 4 when occasion calls for it. And on the positive side, I can also look at it like this. During the course of my daily construction job, if anything should happen to my right hand, I now got 1 less finger I have to worry about losing. Like the song says,
always look on the bright side of life.
Now, I will say about all these techniques or whatever, if one of these versions works for you, I don't know if it's always a good idea to use them in every single situation. Like, for instance, when you're playing death metal, especially, you got songs like the band Vader's song Wings. Or you've got Morbid Angel's song Dominate. You have these types of songs where it's just 2 to 3 minutes of just this blisteringly fast guitar picking. And it may actually sound better for the bass to just half time it in those instances, because it just may sound up like a fret buzzing mess, but that's your personal preference. That aside, even if you can keep up using one of these 5 methods I demonstrated without it, 1, sounding like shit, 2, without your fingers falling off, or 3, doing permanent tendon damage to your forearm, hooray for you, dude. You're a friggin' savage. One thing I like most about technique number 5 is I don't need to warm up with a metronome every single time I play. I can kind of just jump right in cold and just go. So that remains my favorite method to use, and I'm proud of it. Again, I'll reiterate, I doubt I'm the first person to come up with this technique, but if I did, hooray for me. Hooray! I'm just saying, I never came across it before. I've never seen anybody do it, but there's been like 20 billion people in the history of the planet. Somebody probably did it before me. So if you're digging through the comment section, asshole, somebody got there before you, check this out. I'm not surprised. It's almost impossible these days to do anything original in music with a stringed instrument. Like they say, it's all been done before. I'm still practicing all the time. I'm far from done. I still got slap and pop to learn. I got to learn tapping. I suck at that one, but who knows what other little tips or hacks I might be able to discover with all my insanity if it kicks in again. And God help me, but you're never done learning, though. I don't care if you're Geddy Lee or Victor Wooten, Jaco Pastorius, or Steve DiGiorgio. In fact, I still have a long way to go, And if I figure out anything else useful, look, I'll pass it along to you guys here if it helps. So thanks for watching. Please hit the stupid subscribe button, all that crap. Happy playing. And until the next time, bye.